G'day, it's Shane Dowling here from kangaroocourtofaustralia.com. Now I'm about to play you a video of former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, who gave a speech at the National Press Club in Canberra last Wednesday, 29th of September, in relation to the cancelled submarine deal between Australia and France, which was cancelled by the current Prime Minister, Scott Morrison. And Malcolm Turnbull didn't miss him, called him sneaky, deceitful, unloaded with both barrels on his integrity and reputation and the damage that he's done to Australia's reputation. Now let's have a listen to it now.
Thanks so much, Mr Turnbull. If we could just open towards the end of your commentary, which is about the relationship with France. I wonder, given that you obviously formed a very warm relationship with Emmanuel Macron at the time of the signing of the contract and afterwards, have you been able to speak to him since the announcement of AUKUS? What was his take on what communications had been made by the Australian government and particularly by the Prime Minister? What do you think he sees as the implications of the Australian action? There's been a suggestion that France just sees it as a commercial deal rather than as a strategic one. And how should we seek to fix the relationship with France?
Well, Laura, I guess I have spoken to Emmanuel Macron. He is a friend, and I've stayed in touch with him since I left office. He's one of the great leaders of our times, an enormously important figure in global politics, and of course, particularly in Europe. Look, I'm not going to, quote him, but what you've heard from the French government is held. Those are views held right across the board. I mean, there is nobody in France that I'm aware of saying, oh, this is just another commercial deal, too bad. Not at all. I mean, Jean-Yves Le Drian, the foreign minister, when he said it was a stab in the back, was not speaking just for himself. There is outrage, absolute outrage, because what it tells you is that Australia can't be trusted. You see, Scott Morrison, when he does something that is criticised as being slippery or disingenuous or dissembling in domestic politics, and of course that does happen from time to time, and your members no doubt draw that to the public's attention, it reflects on him, it reflects on the government, but when you do that, when you conduct yourself in such a deceitful manner internationally, it has a real impact on Australia. An Australian Prime Minister is always representing Australia, but at home, people see him or her as representing his or her government, political party, or whatever. But on the international stage, the Prime Minister of the day is Australia, and his or her conduct is much more consequential. And that is why dealing in good faith, being honest, being open, look, honestly, we have a massive interest in this. I mean, what seems to have been overlooked is that one of our national security assets is trustworthiness. And Mr Morrison has behaved clearly. I mean, doesn't he even argue with it? His acolytes and admirers have since praising him for his clever sneakiness. I mean, this is an appalling episode in Australia's international affairs, and the consequences of it will endure to our disadvantage for a very long time. I mean, the fact that there was no discussion and this extraordinary subterfuge and deceit that was practiced, it has left us with so many unresolved questions. And anyone who questions it, such as those unfortunate members of the Labor Party who question it, are essentially accused of being unpatriotic. Well, look, I can say this to you. I'm not getting any lectures on patriotism from Scott Morrison, right? I defended the national security of this country and its national interest. And I know the way that he has behaved is putting that at risk. In terms of the region, look, the way Scott Morrison handled this has definitely damaged us in the region. There's no question about that, and it's largely on the question of trust. You know, I was not able to achieve what I did with the TPP. I couldn't have done that if Shinzo Abe did not trust me. He was, you know, again, I've written about this in my book, he was initially very wary because going ahead without the United States, what was Trump going to think about that? How would others come along? Shinzo Abe trusted me, right? President Joko Widodo trusted me, and they trusted Australia. So what Morrison has done, and you know, he can blather and people can try to spin it as much as they like. The fact is that this was a big double cross. This was deceitful conduct on any view, acting in bad faith. So that's a real problem for us. Just generally, you know, I think I mean, obviously relations, you know, ambassadors will return, things will at the surface get back to normal, but the trust is gone. You know, that's the thing you can't get around. We hear a lot from politicians about values, but I tell you, trust, telling the truth, being consistent and reliable, those are important values, vital values, and a reputation for being trustworthy has been a great national asset for Australia, part of our national security armoury. I mean, Joe Biden talked about this at the United Nations when he said there's going to be more diplomacy, you know, and less military. This is critical. So this was a shocking error in the way the, you know, blowing up the deal with France, the partnership with France was done, and not just to France. You know, there's been a lot of very immature, unreflective commentary on this, saying, "Oh, what a clever wheeze! You know, how smart they were to trick the French, you know, and how brilliantly sneaky." I mean, you're playing for keeps in international affairs, and throwing your reputation for being trustworthy away is a terrible, terrible mistake.
Now, you just heard Malcolm Turnbull unload with both barrels on the reputation and integrity of the current Australian Prime Minister, Scott Morrison. Now, for whatever reason, Malcolm Turnbull's continued to have taken a very close interest in the submarine deal. It was originally announced in 2016 when Malcolm Turnbull was Prime Minister. But since he's left office, he's continued to follow it closely for whatever reason. And he's admitted in recent days he's actually spoken to the French President Macron in relation to the cancelled deal. I'm about to publish another article on my website, Kangaroo Court of Australia, in relation to Malcolm Turnbull and why he possibly has taken such a close interest. I find it rather disturbing myself. I think he should have moved on, given that he's no longer Prime Minister. So make sure you visit my website, Kangaroo Court of Australia. I'll be publishing another article, like I said, on Sunday, the 3rd of October. And I'll also have links to previous articles I've written on the issue.